Hello and welcome to the Election Corner on One Man Think Tank. Today we will be talking about the rise and potential fall of Pete Buttigieg in this 2020 Democratic primary. Now, how did he rise? Let's start with that question. Well, taking a look at the polling, you can see he began to seriously rise just after the October Democratic debate, albeit he did have his own precipitous rise in early April, when he first got name recognition, running as the millennial candidate, running on things such as Medicare for all, getting big money out of politics, etc., etc. However, over time, he drifted more towards the center and became more indescribable from other candidates such as Harris and Booker. However, in late October, as I mentioned before, he had this amazing rise in the polls, which also translated to states such as Iowa, where he currently leads. Unfortunately, I don't have anything better than Real Clear Politics right now for this. But he rose, and this was basically based off of a direct attack on Elizabeth Warren, making her seem flaky on Medicare for all, and making her seem unprepared for serious debates, coming across as an intellectual, well-spoken, clean candidate that anyone could vote for, plus he's gay. Doesn't mention that very often. And it helped him rise, but now we're starting to see a plateau of support when he was once considered the golden child, racing to the top. As I mentioned in my video on Warren, any primary election consists of three types of voters: fair-weather voters, single-issue voters, and your core base. Mayor Buttigieg's core base is about 7%, it seems, which is a good core base to have, especially in a race with over 13 candidates still, blimey. However, he was able to capture quite a few fair-weather voters off Warren, hence how she declined and he was stealing off her voters. And his goal is to turn those voters into core supporters. However, with fair-weather voters, that's very hard to do. The group it's easy to do it with are single-issue voters on things like health care, anti-corruption reform, abortion rights. And this is where Mayor Pete has shown his weakness. He has been unable to win these single-issue voters, and a lot of the fair-weather voters, for one simple reason. He has had a lot of trouble with transparency as of late. Many people thought his issues with race relations would sink him, but given the fact no candidate seriously went after him for it, he kinda got off scot-free, like Biden with race. One-to-one, Buttigieg's old comments about African Americans and education were basically the same as Joe Biden's on how you just need to play a gramophone in the bedroom, and that will help educate the kids. But neither were really attacked on it, and hence neither really were hurt by it. So, what happened to Mayor Pete that brought him down? It can be simply described as Elizabeth Warren found something that looked bad for him. We, as the collective, all of a sudden saw Mayor Pete as a lot less clean, a lot less intelligent, a lot less snappy with everything, and I think it can be summarized by this one line from this New York Times article. But in Davenport, Mark Regenweather, 53, of DeWitt, Iowa, said he was not bothered by Mr. Buttigieg's work with McKinsey, though he said he was quite concerned about Mr. Buttigieg's lack of transparency. "I have a question about that," he said. "What have you got to hide? We've had enough of that already." So, what happened is this was a twofer of a lack of transparency. Part one was Mayor Buttigieg has been hosting fundraisers. All the candidates except for, I believe, Warren and Sanders really host fundraisers. And almost all of them have them behind closed doors, so you can make whatever promises to the fundraisers you want. I will give Joe Biden credit here, as this firm says, as MarketWatch reports, I can't find it here. Former president is the only other current Democratic candidate who regularly opens his fundraisers to a pool of reporters. Warren only does fundraisers for the Democratic Party, and she'll only do those if they're open to the media. And Sanders holds grassroots fundraisers, which are essentially rallies for encouraging small donors. So, Buttigieg entered the top 4. He had been able to get to the top 4 by, if I'm being frank, coming across as cleaner than everyone else in the race who was not in the top 4. And he was able to do that because you don't get a lot of scrutiny when you're not in the top tier candidates. I'll just say top tier, because there's no top number. It could be top 2, top 1, but top tier. No one's been able to break 30 for a very long time in any consistent way, so these are our top tier candidates. Buttigieg has been able to avoid being scrutinized, that's the word, by not being a threat to the top 3. But in the past month, he's received attacks from Warren, Biden, and Sanders. And all of them came at different points. I'll focus on Warren, since she's the one who's going after Buttigieg the hardest. She must have seen polling that came out that said, hey, your candidates aren't going to Sanders or Biden. They're going your voters are almost exclusively going to Buttigieg. Which naturally means she's going to go after Buttigieg. And she called him out on the fundraisers. You're not being transparent. You're not being open. This then led into the second issue, which is this McKinsey and Company issue. Mayor Buttigieg worked for them for about, I think, 3 years, and he signed a non-disclosure agreement with them. This non-disclosure agreement basically said, you can't talk about who you worked for or worked with. And that hurt Mayor Buttigieg's reputation. It put him in a very bad position. Because, 1, he signed a non-disclosure. 2, it also meant he can't tell people which companies he worked for, and the fact he didn't seem to really care about going after it, it doesn't matter whether he did or not, that's how it was portrayed in the media, hurt his image. Hence that quote I gave you before. And as such, it's made him seem a little bit less trustworthy. I'd now like to go over here to Real Clear Politics again. As you can see, he's had prolific rise right in November. This is when everything came together for him. When he looked really good after the October debate, he got up to here, and that's when Warren started to go down. Then, in the November debate, he also came across as very clean, cut, intelligent, snappy, like Barack Obama, to be frank. But now, as the memory of the debate goes away, his support starts to wane. And this also aligns perfectly with these scandals I mentioned before. So, the real question is this the end of Mayor Pete? Because as you can see, I like using Morning Consult as a good baseline, partially because they have pretty graphics. Also partially because they are probably the best weekly pollster in the race. And as you can see, Mayor Pete is about 9% nationally and 9% in the early states. Real Clear Politics has him ahead, but that's because we don't have many Iowa-only polls. And as you can see, he's starting to drop in the individual polling at the national level, and he's starting to plateau in the averages for The Economist. So will he plateau or will he drop? And I'm going to be frank, I think he's going to drop. He had a good rise, but then, so he has a lot of what it seems to be to compete in the lower tier of candidates. He can go ham on these guys. In fact, he made it up here and was able to keep himself separated from the rest of the pack for a very long time. That takes skill to do. I'm going to give him credit there. However, to get from here to here requires more than just looking nice. He has to put forward more work to start clawing votes from Warren. And that's going to mean putting out very serious policies that get headlines. The only headline I've seen about Buttigieg in policy recently is the fact he's going to spend a couple $1 trillion in federal spending, and he's going to pay for it. That's not the headline you want. For example, whenever Warren releases a plan, Warren or Sanders release a plan, there's this big headline of Sanders/Warren proposes X for workers, for the oceans, for the environment, you name it. That's good policy press. It tells people, hey, they care about my issue. Mayor Buttigieg has not been able to do that so far. And given the fact that he seems to be flagging overall, and or at the very least, plateauing, I'm inclined to think he's going to start going down after Iowa. I think he is going to, in the next few polls, start to look rather sluggish. And I'm going to mention something else. I think this summarizes Mayor Pete's agenda entirely, and why I think he's going to start falling. Mayor Pete said Monday his campaign said that will make future fundraisers open to the public, including reporters, and the names of people raising money for the campaign will be released to the public. He's only doing this because he's been called out on it. That's putting out the fire after it's happened, as opposed to keeping it from happening in the first place. And this is where his weakness lies. His campaign is not prepared to preemptively deal with fires. And when you're in the top tier, people are shooting for you. Biden's campaign is shooting for him. Warren's campaign is shooting for him. Sanders' campaign is shooting for him. This will sink him. His campaign's inability to put out to prevent these fires. It's like, and frankly, it would be like their attempts to put out the fires preemptively are the equivalent of lining your building with asbestos because it stops fires. That was what happened with the Douglas plan. They went out of their way to get a lot of black people to say, oh, we support it. But they did it in the exact wrong way. I think what we're witnessing is essentially a campaign that's a little bit unprepared for the big time. And the other weakness of Buttigieg, and why I bring up policy again, policy does matter to people. It is a key factor for them. He also pledged to restore White House press briefings if elected. Now, as you know, Trump's famously not hold a press briefing for a very long time. But every Democratic candidate has basically pledged to do so. Even if they haven't, they've either given it lip service or said it directly, but that's not how you solve this problem. If you're saying, ooh, it looks like I'm taking dodgy money, you say something like, oh, I'm going to support a public financing scheme. It doesn't matter if you're actually going to, that's what you say. You don't say, I'm going to restore press briefings. And that's just where it is. They have been relying so much on polling from the top 3 candidates and how well they've been doing. I would not be surprised if his attacks on Medicare for All, or Warren on Medicare for All, are exclusively based on the fact that he got some internal polling that said, hey, people think Warren is being dodgy about Medicare for All. If you hammer this point, you can gain some leverage. That's great. That gets you leverage, but it doesn't get you all the way there. It gets you to about 12%. You then need to propose another option. And for a really long time, he's been pushing this Medicare for all who want it, or Medicare for some, depending on which side of the political spectrum you're on. And he that was not gaining any traction. He proposed Medicare for all who want it from about July to today, and it had no effect on his polling. Attacking Warren on Medicare for all and her seeming skittishness, or her active skittishness to say she's going to raise taxes, was what caused him to rise. But he needs his own plan to take him above Warren, above Sanders, and to seriously challenge Biden. And his plans don't do that, because he doesn't seem to actually care about his plans, or have beliefs. And that's what will take him down. So, this has been the Election Corner on One Man Think Tank. Please remember to like the video if you found it helpful. Feel free to leave a comment down below. And if you want to see more commentary and such from the channel, please remember to subscribe and click that notification bell. Otherwise, have a wonderful day.